Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime, Neil Coulong, to my left. What's up, Big Neil?
You bet, Lance. It's a great day. We're excited here. Post conference championship weekend, we do have the cross-state quote unquote rivals, one-time Stiegel partner, Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 47, which is some combination of Roman numerals I don't really want to bother getting into. I don't know why we don't just call it by the numbers by now.
It's what, 57?
57. We are at
okay.
57. We
All
are
right,
at the
well,
Mike Merriweather Super Bowl.
that's
The
easy to
John
remember.
Fiala Super Bowl.
It's 5 years older than me. Okay. That's easy to remember. As always, listeners, if you want to join the show, pick up to Donovan. If you want to join the show, make sure you join us live on YouTube. Also, you can join us by going to your local or whatever your podcast feeder or reader and doing a search for the New Standard and giving us a subscription there. Want to thank all of you guys for letting us, for allowing us to be monetized and getting us there. If you want to contribute to the show in that way via super chat, please do. We appreciate it. But want to jump right into the news and notes. A little bit of Steeler news. Muth and and Hayward, Big Hayward, are going to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, it's always kind of nice to see the injury replacement players getting in there, the Super Bowl participant replacement players, which in a way qualifies them kind of as Pro Bowlers. I don't know entirely. I'm not 100% certain Pat Freiermuth belongs in the Pro Bowl or whatever variation of the Pro Bowl this is today. But I certainly think Cam Hayward does. I was surprised he didn't initially. But it's good to see. We also have a big national commercial spot coming from Cam Hayward. We have to be excited about that. I think, Lance, what all this means is they're already aware he's going to win Walter Payton Man of the Year. Finally, it only took 6 nominations for him to do that. I'm not even sure what political representative I'm thinking of that lost 5 elections before finally winning one. But I think this might be Cam's year and an honor that is very well deserved. But the Pro Bowl is as well. As for Freiermuth, out of his second year replacing future Hall of Famer Travis Kelce in this game, good for him. It's certainly a plus for his developing career. I don't know if he is quite peaked. I think he's got some.
He better not have peaked.
He's got some game left to develop. I don't think he is probably quite as good as most Steelers fans think that he is, but he's a solid player. They have to like what they have. He's not going to be a premier elite level tight end, but he's a very good 3-down tight end for a second-year player. He's going to continue to develop, and hopefully he can make some connections and find some people that'll help improve his game while he's down there for, once again, the Pro Bowl, even though it's a collection of skills competitions. Or I honestly, I should know what this is, but I really don't.
No, it's fine that you don't know, because I was going to ask you. I
was going to ask you, and it's fine that I don't know. That makes sense.
No, I was going to ask you what you thought, about the touch football. I knew you knew that part of it. I don't know about the other skills. I knew you knew it was touch football.
Yeah, now that you say it, yes, I was stuck on the skills part of it. But yeah, they have I don't know. Football, to me, football is not a game that you play recreationally. It's not the one that you choose if you're out with your buddies. You don't play football lightly, and certainly NFL fans don't get into football that is not high level, highly competitive, a lot riding on it. And that's never been the Pro Bowl, but to dilute that even more, I don't know how this is going to work.
No, here it goes. Here it is, Neil. We'll watch the Pro Bowl for 5 minutes. Now, that's a win. I haven't watched the Pro Bowl probably in 20 years, but I am going to watch it for 5 minutes this year because I want to see, I'm intrigued to see how bad that touch football game is going to look. Now,
we don't even know what to look for. We don't even know what good touch football is.
Like if they have cool, no idea. But what I want to see though is if they have coolers and beverages on the sidelines. So like when he gets tagged, he runs to the sideline. The camera pans on the Budweiser cooler. He opens the cooler, opens the Bud, takes a drink. Then we see a Budweiser commercial. I just want to see how bad this could actually be.
How big of a sellout it will be.
That's
The funny
what
thing
I
is,
want
you're
to
going
see.
to do all that. You need Travis Kelce in the game. He's not going to be there. So,
Yes, I mean he can't milly wop, but big news. The big news, and I don't want to take up too much of the show time on it, but just speak your mind and your thoughts about it. The show we're going to talk about Art Rooney and his State of the Steeler comments on this show. I think a lot to dig into. Tom Brady announced his retirement this morning. What's your thoughts on that?
yeah, it certainly hit me at a difficult time for my morning, but at the same time, news that I guess is in a weird way surprising. Anytime that you feel surprised that a 45-year-old NFL player retires, you know that player has a fairly significant impact on the game. And I think it is mild to state that that's exactly what Tom Brady did over 22 seasons. I was telling my daughter this on the way to school this morning. I don't remember the NFL very well before Tom Brady, and the cycle in which his career has gone. It's remarkable to a point where this is legendary in any sport. And this is all stuff that we knew years ago about him, and he continued to play at a very high level. This year, maybe not the best, but if this was his worst season, and I think it's in the bottom three, I've looked at this statistically, his bottom three season had him leading the league in completions. It had him at top 5 or 6, I think, in touchdowns. Not the best in yards or average, but again, he's 44, 45 years old. We won't see a player like this again. This is a guy, he spanned multiple iterations of the salary cap. He has seen the careers of other Hall of Fame players that pale in comparison to him start and end over his tenure. The fact that he played in 11 of technically 57 Super Bowls. He won 7 of them. You don't have a way to quantify that against anybody else. It's simply impossible. In my opinion, he is the Babe Ruth of this sport. And the fact that he did it in the modern era of the NFL is nothing short of legendary. If that term can be used for anybody, it's Tom Brady and Babe Ruth, probably.
He's the Billy. I mean, he's the Billy. I mean, the one thing that's comical in all this was when I would think of Tom Brady and the Steelers, it was just a guaranteed loss. I mean, and I'm just going to admit it, as a Steeler fan, over the course of his career, anytime you saw the Patriots on the schedule, just admit it to yourself, you wrote an L by it. You just did, and that's me.
You wrote an L by it, and you got pissed off because you had to, and then you went after Brady, how much he sucks and how you hate him and all that.
Yes,
he drew out negative emotion like a wrestling heel, and he wasn't that guy at all. I mean, it's amazing the impact.
He turned out to be likable.
Yeah,
later in his life, and he's a California guy from up here in the Bay Area. He's from the South Bay. I think him and Barry Bonds went to the same high school. I know I worked with some people that used to live next door to his parents. Said he was a great guy. I mean, all I can say is, he whooped the Steelers' ass, and maybe that's the highest compliment that I can give him outside of the fact that he's the Billy. And when you look at his career, I mean, hell, he's kind of like Kobe-esque in the sense where Kobe wore 2 numbers and is a Hall of Famer in both. Tom Brady probably had 3 Hall of Fame careers. If you split it up in 3 different sections, he probably had 3 Hall of Fame careers. So he's no doubt the Billy Goat. He could play some more football if he wanted, but I'm glad that Tom Brady is moving on to his next chapter in his life and being a single dad and so on and so forth. Great player. It's going to be weird to not see Tom Brady kick the Steelers' ass, but it's also going to be nice to not see Tom Brady kick the Steelers' ass.
If anything, and Steelers fans are going to grab onto this for as long as they can. We beat Brady the last time we played him, as if that matters. I was highlighting the 3 AFC Championship games in which Brady thumped the Steelers.
And I was at one of those, and it was fucking terrible.
I wouldn't
Excuse
have
me.
even gone to the last one. I mean, I remember I went on the Fan in Pittsburgh the night before that last AFC Championship game, and I was like, the Steelers played their Super Bowl already. Without Bell, he was largely hurt at that time. They don't have a chance to beat this team. Unfortunately, they just don't. The Patriots are really good, but they don't have the star power that the Steelers do, and that's going to be how we discuss that era, isn't it? I mean, it's all about the Steelers fantasy football players versus the machine that was the Patriots, which was led by Tom Brady.
Absolutely.
But even with that star power that the Steelers had, that 2016 AFC Championship game, you walked in, they had no chance. You knew they were going to lose.
Baked.
It was like it's not even losing that game anymore. They lose it plenty often. It's more, I'd rather it be to somebody other than Tom Brady for once.
They got baked. And I want to apologize to YouTube for dropping the F-bomb. But see, that's what Tom Brady does. He makes you drop the F-bomb. But the last news and notes.
Notice. Did you drop the F-bomb or did I?
I did. I slid it in there real nice.
Oh, I do that once a show. What's the problem?
I slid it in there.
Are we not supposed to do that?
I don't know. Anyway, before we
get apologizing for everything we do in society today.
Exactly. Let me get to the main topic of the program. Before we do that real quick, Frank Reich, DeMeco Ryans, and Sean Payton get hired for jobs respectively for Carolina, Houston, and Denver. What's your first thought when you saw those hirings?
First thought, DeMeco Ryans. I told you so. Best move of the year, the Houston Texans hiring the best coordinator in football. He's going to have an immediate impact on a franchise that desperately needs it. He gets to play with the second overall pick, find themselves a quarterback. Schematically, he made kings out of sheep in San Francisco. Those guys, a lot of them are not good individual players. It's not like they're highly skilled or anything like that. He made them twice as good as they were. You're going to see, this is probably why San Francisco is going so hard after Vic Fangio. I'd probably do the same thing. But DeMeco Ryans is a high-level coach. He is a high-level defensive mind. They're going to be able to build significant talent on that team where they're drafting, the future cap space that they have. This is why they gave him a 6-year contract. They understand that this is going to take some time to build. That team's going to be competitive sooner rather than later. And I'm really excited for it because I absolutely love DeMeco Ryans. I love the 49ers, how they've put everything together. After Saleh went to New York, Ryans became the man there. They did even more stuff, which was with what was already a great schematic defense. Ryans is even better. And the players love him. There isn't one that doesn't speak glowingly about his ability to teach, to communicate. These are the real things that a coach does, okay? They're not playing a video game. It's not about selecting the play at the time or calling timeout when you need to. A head coach's job is to organize and communicate their general philosophy and make sure that those things are getting done. Ryans can do that at a high level, and he's proved that. The fact that it's good to see the big money, long contract, probably not big money, but the long contract with the team that desperately needs it, making a big investment into a black coach, I think is long overdue. But I don't even want to say this, but I will just point out that DeMeco Ryans deserves a head coaching job, if anybody in the cycle does. And Houston made the best move they could have made.
Absolutely. He has Houston ties, was a player there, was a very good player.
Very good player.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah,
he got hurt a bunch. He was kind of undersized, but he was a really good linebacker.
Very good player.
Very smart. Second-round draft pick.
Alabama guy. It's going to be interesting to see if that plays into a part of them selecting Bryce Young. Of course, they have the number 2 pick. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays a part of that. What'd you think about the compensation for Sean Payton?
I need to see it finalized. On my team, the breaking news team within Sports Illustrated, we have not confirmed that yet. The word is 17 to 20 million a year for Sean Payton, which is kind of the going rate for the top coach. Considering coach's salary is it's off of the salary cap. You hear reports of stuff, but they don't have any obligation to report it. There's nowhere that it's specifically tracked short of news reports that come out. We don't really have a great sense, a formal sense of who's getting paid what, but some franchises want to pay that. Others don't. Considering the success that he has had, which is substantial, and I don't mean just the Super Bowl. He developed with, granted, a very good quarterback, but he developed consistent high-level offensive success with that quarterback and with a bunch of other key pieces that came and went over the time that he was there. The Saints were a difficult team to beat. They won a lot of games when he was there. He certainly is battle tested. He's put a lot of his assistant coaches into head coach positions. He's had outstanding coordinators on his team. I think it's fair to say he knows how to run a team, and if that's the going price, do it. You know, if I think, and I've said this with all due respect to Nathaniel Hackett, Denver needed to put an adult in that damn room. I mean, Denver was a horrendous team, offensively in particular. Whatever it is that Hackett was doing, it was like nothing worked. Nothing at all worked. Significant problem for them. They needed to spend to get some pedigree to build the team back up, in particular, obviously, their high dollar quarterback. So now they've spent a significant amount of draft capital and are paying a substantial amount of money for Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. And they're going to expect pretty immediate results. But the reality is, I would think that it would work. I think Payton is a good coach. I think Wilson is probably a bit better of a quarterback than what we saw last year, though I'm not sure where his ceiling exactly is. They can succeed together, but even if they don't, Denver's sunk financially. That pairing isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So you want to give them a little bit of time to kind of see how it will come together. But I feel they have good pieces in place in order to do that. They've got some work to do, and they don't have good draft capital to do it. But it could just be kind of year one of getting out of the mess that they got themselves into.
You know, I think when you make the investment to get Russell Wilson, you got to be all in. I mean, you can't do it half cocked. So at that point, you've got to make it work. And there was no way that they could bring in an inexperienced first time coach again. They've done that. They've been there, done that. He lasted 11 games. They couldn't do that, so they had to go get pedigree. The marquee
that last
guy
game against the Rams was one of the worst that you'll ever see. They were just horrendous.
And specifically,
so
you've got to get a coach that I think the quarterback is going to respect and allow himself to be coached hard by, and that's Sean Payton. And I think it'll work for them. I think they'll be pretty good. They've got a good defense. I think you'll see whatever Russell is, you'll see the best of that. Problem for that division and for the NFL is that guy Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City with Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. You could be at your best, and he could play on one ankle and still beat you. So I think that's the major problem. But let's shift into, and we'll get into our Super Bowl picks probably next week. But let's shift into, and I think Neil is probably picking the same team I'm going to pick. And props to Neil,
which gives me the win.
Props to Neil for only getting one game incorrect this whole playoff season, and that was the Chiefs-Bengals game.
The team that I did not pick did absolutely everything it could do to not win that game.
Yes, they absolutely
did. Laughable.
They absolutely did. And I wish someone would push me out of bounds, and that would result in an extra $15K.
Can I just say this really quick, just because this is in conjunction with my picks? I picked the Bengals +2 against the Chiefs. Toss up for me. I could see that going either way. I bet heavily on Cincinnati's defense being able to stop Mahomes enough to pull out that win, probably something late. They almost did that. I would like to point out 2 playoff losses the Bengals have had the last 2 years. Those are the only times the Bengals defense did not get the big stop it needed at the end of a game. What I really mean by that is Joe Burrow is not playing at the level that people think that he is, and he did it again in these playoffs. He wasn't good on Sunday in the AFC Championship game. He wasn't good. To act as if he was going up against a lesser defense than what Mahomes was, and Mahomes on one leg with some of the plays that Mahomes made, Burrow got outplayed again. For people to continue to insist that he's the one driving all this and give zero credit to Cincinnati's defense is just it's criminal in my opinion. Just a phenomenal job by Cincinnati's defense in that game. They just, their offense couldn't help them out. They had to punt. They get the late penalty that put him into field goal range. Kid hits a big kick in the cold. It's a tough game to lose. Cincinnati's defense did a lot except for that one drive, and that's what happened against the Rams in the Super Bowl. And everyone still wants to praise Joe Burrow as if he's the one doing it. It's ridiculous. Mahomes is twice the player Burrow is right now.
It's easy, and I love the comment from Kevin Jones. Ghost of Pac-Man and Montez pushed OC into Mahomes and ran to the tunnel.
What a horrible mistake.
That's great. I feel for the kid, but
you do. There's look, 99 times out of 100, that's getting called. I don't want to hear anything about you don't call that the title game. No, you have to call that. He's almost out of the wide stripe on the sideline.
Yes,
when he got hit.
It was
like, dude, come on.
The kid was trying to make a play. It got out in front of him.
That's football. That happens.
It happens. It's an emotional and
he's
physical
a terrible
game.
Person. He made a mistake. Guys drop passes. It's kind of the same thing,
Yeah, that's what it is. But let's jump into the topic of the program. And sorry, it's taken us a while to get there, but there's been a lot of news floating around the NFL. I thought it was definitely apropos that we spend some time talking about quite possibly the greatest football player of all time. Art Rooney jumped into and did his State of the Steelers sort of press conference that he does every year, where he kind of lays out his feelings of the previous season, and kind of that's his last time he talks pretty much for the entire season, for the upcoming season. I want to jump into some of the things that he said in his press conference with the local Pittsburgh press. And this is what he said overall about the Steelers. And give me your thoughts on it. Let me just start by saying that even though we fell short of making the playoffs this year, I thought the second half of the season was encouraging. Obviously, we still have a lot of areas that we need to improve on, but I like the way the team kept fighting down the stretch and kept ourselves alive. Real quick, one thing I noticed in that comment is that he views it a little bit different from us. He's looking at the entire process in terms of team building and getting from point A to point Z, which would be a championship. As fans, we only look at point Z, Super Bowl. We don't win a Super Bowl. The season is not a success. And clearly, in these comments, he's putting some context to how he is framing the season. What's your thoughts on those comments by Art Rooney?
I think they're 100% expected. Nothing about that is a surprise. I could have told you probably to the syllable. That's what he was going to say. It's what he has to say. He's not going to get into a whole lot of the particulars of how the meal is made, but it's fair. It's reasonable. I'd point out that you probably could say the same thing about last year, and maybe not quite the same the year before because it was sort of the opposite. But it all ends in a very similar fashion, either a first-round playoff loss or just missing the playoffs. Where are they going, I think, is the question. And if anything, I would have thought it'd be a fun exercise if we felt like being trolls in this way, to go through and rank the questions that were asked. Keep in mind, this is not like a scrum. They know about this. They know it's one representative per outlet. They're preparing the question ahead of time. And the level of questions they asked, I think, are, I don't know, not the ones I would ask the owner of the team. If I get one question to ask, that's not the one I would ask probably.
Let's do. Do you want to do that? Do you want to rank some of the questions?
I feel bad. I don't want to. It's. I'll rate Can we rate the questions and not specifically say who asked them?
We can.
It isn't personal. I'm not. I know all of these guys. I'm not trying to rip on anybody. Just some.
We can't. We can do that. We can do that. That way, I'll keep you clean.
All right.
I'll keep you clean in this.
Okay. Let's do this. I don't. The first question, it's kind of it has to be asked. I think I wouldn't waste the question. I would just kind of assume Rooney's intro comments are going to do that. He's going to speak generally. He's going to speak on Kenny Pickett. We can accept that going into it. I wouldn't have prepared a question on Kenny Pickett for that reason. He's going to give you general thoughts on offense and defense. We have a good sense of what he's going to say. The key for him is going to push out the improvement. You have to ask about Canada, so props to that. I think the direction of the team is probably where I would have gone, but let's go with this. First one, when you evaluate the season in its total, is that the way you look at it, as in the improvement part? You talked about the second half. Do you evaluate the early stages or what happened in the second half of the season overrides that when you evaluate the whole season? In other words, two parts. Are you ignoring the first part for the second part? That's a fair question. You're going to get something from that. Do you want me to read his response?
So let me ask: are we ranking them from good to terrible, or from which way are we ranking it? Like,
good to terrible works.
okay,
I'm
okay.
looking at it more in you get one question, and this is probably the last time you're going to talk to him. You get one question. Is the value of this question, does it meet the situation that you're in? That's how I'm going to determine it. I don't want to call it good or terrible. It's kind of more valuable or not valuable, considering the circumstances that you're in. That question, I think, has to be asked. So I would say, yeah, that's good enough.
And so he answered. So you'll read the question,
Okay.
the question that you think, and then I'll read his answer. And Rooney answered. I mean, look, I think you want to see the team improve over the course of the season from start to finish, no matter what your record is. That's what you're shooting for, to get better as the season goes on. I thought we did that. Obviously, you'd rather not dig too deep of a hole in the beginning, which unfortunately we did. But the fact we were breaking a new quarterback, two of them, in fact, was something that I think was a factor in at least some of the difficulties we have in the first half of the season. But we weren't playing that well on the defensive side either. Giving up big plays early in games doesn't help. So I don't discount completely the first half of the season. You can't ignore it. But I think, again, the key is seeing improvement over the course of the whole season. It's encouraging. His answer is very much in line with what we thought why they retained Matt Canada. And I'm sure you're going to point to that question. They're looking at it over the course of the entire season. Had they, over the second half of the season, not done very well and gone 7-2, his answers would be very different. And his response to the coaching staff and whatever he was going to do was going to be very different. Them going 7-2, in my opinion, this answer is telling me, okay, I'll give it some time. We went 7-2 over the last half. Don't F around and we be terrible next season.
I think it's, again, he's using it as an opportunity to point out the headline that he wants out of this, which is we improved a bunch. And I think it's the right answer to a question that's not very challenging. But I think probably gives the most thorough answer with this question than any other. I don't know what else we would expect him to say, but you do need to get that on the record. So, it's kind of the question and the answer that needed to be asked. You go to the next one. I think this one, do you want to read it? I think this one is the one people would have paid to see. That this is kind of the headline question from a fan perspective. Do you want to read it or should I?
Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read it.
Is that improvement on offense specifically the reason that you decided to stick with Matt Canada for another year? To point out the key thing in here, notice how he used the word specifically. It's not being ambiguous. He's hitting it straight up. Are you sticking with Matt Canada because of the improvement over the year? Probably the best question that was asked for that very reason. No wiggle room. You're going to ask the question directly, and you're going to let him decide whether or not he wants to answer it directly. That has to be done as a reporter. You don't get to argue with the subject. You don't get
Right.
to berate them. You don't get to debate the issue. You ask a question and you are ethically obligated to write down the response. However you frame that is up to you, but you don't get to antagonize a subject. It doesn't work like that. I felt this question is the most professional and pointed that it could have been. He forced him to answer it specifically, which is very important with a lot of this, because the next one in particular, you're going to see all kinds of wiggle room that's being left open for that. This is the biggest question I'd feel fans would have had. It addresses the most controversial move this offseason, and he forced the owner to answer something very specifically.
And this is what the owner said. And we'll jump into Meat Whip 21 from Germany. Big up to you, my friend. His question that he's asking as well, because I thought that's very good as well. Rooney answered by saying, "Yeah, I think so." I love the use of the word improvement as well, because improvement gives him the ability to not say the offense sucked.
Mhm.
Like like you can say it improved and still think that the offense sucked, because you can go from averaging 4 points a game to 6 points a game and say it improved,
Yeah.
but it absolutely sucked.
Yeah,
So I
technically it
thought
did.
the use of the word improvement I thought was great. So he said, I think we like to see the improvement. With a rookie quarterback, they seem to work well together. They built a good working relationship. To sort of start over again with a new offensive coordinator could wind up back in the same situation again, where the first half of the season, you're breaking in a new coordinator. So we just felt like there's enough there to build on, that we want to continue to keep the group together. You know what that answer sounds like to me? How you define a bad marriage that sticks together for a few extra years when they probably should have got divorced in year 5, but they made it to year 8.
It's fair, because at the same time, look at how well, and keep in mind, I mean, Art Rooney has grown up around the media his entire life. He is an expert at couching all of his statements. I think we like to see improvement.
Yes.
With a rookie quarterback, they seem to work well together. They built a good working relationship. There's something solid. To sort of start over again with the new offensive coordinator could wind up back in the same situation. He's not going to stick himself to anything. And that's, you expect that. It's funny to me, because he isn't being flippant with it. He's not being avoidant. It's just really, he's not top to bottom putting any of this in stone. And he's not a brash, big talking kind of guy, which is helpful. In other words, if you look at it in these terms, Rex Ryan would have answered this question very differently. And the Rex Ryan thing, while entertaining and certainly good for business for people like me, I don't know how good of an angle that is in terms of leadership. So I think he's generally correct in what he's saying, though, and it will valid. It makes sense. What he's really saying is, if we start over with another offensive coordinator, we're in the same spot that we were in, because last year we had the experienced offensive coordinator just with the inexperienced quarterback. Next year, our only way to get continuity is to have the experienced coordinator continue to work with the experienced quarterback. Results may vary. We'll see, but it makes the most sense from a strategic standpoint to buy into that logic. And I think that's generally what he's saying here, banking on continued improvement, which, as we've talked about many times, was there. Now, what the ceiling of that improvement is a different story. We definitely saw them go from being the most pathetic offense in the league to one that was kind of bad. That's a nice improvement. I'm not sure.
Most pathetic to Denver.
Yeah, we'll give Denver their due, but I'm not sure top to bottom if that means their trajectory will continue the same way. But I see their logic in making the choice that they made, and he addressed that very well. I think it was a good question. I like the answer.
Yeah, I agree that I think the logic of it is sound. I'm just hoping that they can add dynamic ball players on the offensive side that can raise the tide. But to meet Whip's point, he said, did we improve really so much in the second part of the season compared to the tougher first part of the schedule? And
did you watch the games in each of those sides? It's this comes down to the constant need to affirm this wide gap of talent between every team in the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles were a better team than the Steelers. I think we know that. It's not as if this is college in which the Eagles will beat a team like the Steelers by 30 points every time they play them. 30-point wins are rare in the NFL, unless you're the 2022 Steelers, you play the Bills and the Eagles. But it doesn't happen that way consistently. The Steelers got things fixed because of those bad beats, okay? The Eagles went out and almost lost to the Lions. Frankly, they should have lost to the Lions. Any team can beat any team, but the gap between, say, number 1 overall and like 25 overall is not incredibly wide. So to bank everything over 8 games on this generalized sense that the quality of opponent was just that much better in the first half of the season, or good enough to completely disqualify success against the teams that frankly are the Steelers' peers, not their superiors, it's nonsense. It doesn't make any difference. You did the things you were supposed to do then. By league average, you shouldn't have lost by 30 points to the Bills and the Eagles. You shouldn't have. The league average loss is like 4 points or something like that. They got manhandled by better teams. Now, I understand that they're better. It's just in the NFL, they're much closer than people think that they are. The quality of your opponent, I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying it does not account for 30 points. It doesn't account for 4 touchdowns in a game. It's not that wide of a gap. They showed improvement because they got better, not simply because of the team that they're going up against. It's not as simple as that. That's what Tomlin means when he says things like nameless gray faces. It's not about the opponent. It's about what we're doing. The Steelers were a gong show the first half of the year, offensively and defensively. They were a terrible football team. They were mediocre by the end. That improvement existed. It's not because of who they played. They got better. They changed things up. They improved what they were doing. Give them that at least.
I think you're 100%. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, your obligation is to get better regardless of who you play. And, you know, it results in wins as well. And thank you, Kevin, for posting these stats. When he said in the first 8 games, they averaged 11.8 points per game. Ouch. And in the last 9, 21 points per game. And I think the Steelers fans, the Steelers.
They average 11 points a game the first 8 games? No, that's not even close.
No, I think a little bit more, probably about 13.
It's like 15. 16. That's horrible, mind you. And they average more than 21 at the end.
Yeah, at the end. And so, but even still, thanks, Kevin. But the context is the
11.
Same. I mean,
shit. This is the 70s.
They improved. And it's fair because you play who you play. That's it. What's the next question that you got for us?
We're going into this, I think, and we'll dissect why this is the worst question and answer of the conversation. A lot of teams now open it up, throw the ball, and try to score a lot of points. Apparently, teams never tried to score a lot of points. So you say you like the formula of running the ball. It's not a formula. What makes you think that can still work in this day and age with how teams go about their offense? My God, is that weird? The answer from Art Rooney. Well, don't get me wrong. I'd like to have an effective passing game too. Way to lead him right into that answer. I mean, I think the best teams can do both. Totally expected. This is what he's going to say. Being a team that's tough to defend means you can do a lot of things right. I think what we're looking for is to be balanced. Oh, God. I hate that term. It's just nonsense. I think we need to improve on the passing game for sure. We need to see more yards after the catch from our receivers. Thank you for bailing the reporter out, Art. You definitely didn't need to say that. That's not what he asked, but that's the key point to all this. Obviously, we need to be better in the red zone. That's another good one. So definitely some places we need to improve on to score more points is the bottom line. That question is, it's the biggest softball that was tossed in this whole thing. When you're allowing the subject to provide you with the cliche answer, with the easiest answer, you're not doing your highest and best with this. To suggest, and he didn't even notice how Rooney didn't even address the run game, which is what the question is trying to ask. It's because he didn't ask specifically about the run game. He's asking in a weird general way, you run the ball a lot. Do you think that can still work today? And instead, what we got was the infamous, well, we want to be balanced, even though literally no team in the league is even remotely balanced in that sense. You run the ball a lot if you throw it 60% of the time in today's NFL. That's a big running game now. And that's with a couple teams that run with their quarterbacks a lot on both designed and improvised. I can't say it. They run the ball a lot with their quarterback. This question, he threw him a rope. We need to see more yards after the catch from our receivers. That's something poignant to look at because that was a significant problem offensively this year, and it has nothing to do with the run game specifically. It is, though, what the Steelers have been trying to utilize in lieu of a run game over the last several years. The concept is the same. It's not the value of running the ball is not physically handing it off to a running back. It's getting the ball into short space with a high percentage of completion and the ability to move down the field. When you are not successful moving after the catch, which the Steelers were not at all this year, they have an offense that largely predicated them on running after the catch, and they didn't do that. So they had a lot of failure in that regard. That's a major problem. And Rooney is giving some insight that they're aware that that's a major problem. What that means when the owner says it is, we're going to do something about it. What that is, I don't know. But that's, unfortunately, when you only get one question, you're not able to follow up. But that would have been the follow-up. What do you intend to do? What are you looking to do to address that? There's schematic issues with that. There are personnel issues with that. There's a lot of things that need to come into it. If you are planning to have your wide receivers getting 5, 6, 7 yards after the catch consistently, there are things you need to do to set them up. And for me, the biggest failure in the Matt Canada offense was the fact he did not use his receivers in concert with one another at all. They didn't run choice or option routes. They didn't run combo routes. Part of that is probably because they have new quarterbacks who don't know what they're doing within the offense that they're in, and their receivers not the greatest in the league, I don't think, for doing these kinds of things. And their offensive coordinator might not be the best at drawing those kinds of things up. Whatever it is, spin it up in the soup, draw one of the answers out. It's going to be correct. It is, though, priority number one, in my opinion, for what they need to do offensively. They have to get their receivers working more in concert with one another to set each other up, to get the ball in more space. Instead of just dealing with zone and man coverage, they need to work off of that based on what it is to help set each other up for bigger plays after the catch and for bigger plays down the field. They don't do that at all right now. And it's almost like Rooney wanted to address that. Wasn't exactly given the opportunity to, but he found kind of a chance to do it, so he threw it in here. So good answer on a weird, awkward question.
Yeah, the question was kind of weird. I thought it was weird, and he did have some nuggets in the answer. Let's pick one more question because I think this is going to break into two parts because the show is running kind of long because of the intro, and there's a couple of questions from the listeners that I want to jump into. Pick one more question, and we'll jump into some other nuggets from this interview because there are some nuggets here. And, well, let's jump into this one. Because Robert posed the question. I don't want to jump into that one. I picked the wrong one, but they said Robert posted this. They asked Rooney if they were going to sign Tomlin again. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no.
I wouldn't get into that. It's not. They never talk about that.
Yes,
we make a thing out of it every single time it happens, and Tomlin's gotten extensions with 1 year left on his deal. He's gotten extensions with 3 years left on his deal. We have no idea why that is or what the rhyme or reason is. If any insight is given, it's largely that Rooney says Tomlin's going to coach until he says he doesn't want to coach. And I don't think that's a shock either. People want to create the sense that there's more than what there probably is regarding that situation. They're comfortable with Mike Tomlin as the team's coach. I understand that the results are not coming the way that people want them to come right now, but they're not going to make a move with their head coach. If their head coach, who would easily get $20 million a year going on TV, if he wanted to not coach, he wouldn't be coaching. It's not because he got fired. It's because he just wouldn't have the desire to do it anymore. If you know Mike Tomlin, he represents himself. He identifies with being a coach more than anything, a teacher, not an NFL coach necessarily, not the Steelers coach necessarily, but just a coach. He eats this stuff up. He's at the Senior Bowl watching punters. He's talking with the low-level assistants and everybody who's there. He lives and breathes ball, and he'll tell you that all the time. I don't think he's going anywhere because this is who he is. This is what he wants to do. He enjoys the hell out of the entire process. I love him for that. I think it's great.
Let me just say this.
I hope he has more success than what he's had, but he's not going anywhere anytime soon.
And we'll probably talk about this in the part 2 of this. But when the owner quotes the coach,
yeah.
I mean, when the owner quotes the coach, I mean, pretty much you're on safe standing. I mean, come on. I mean,
they're together.
I mean, if you read the transcript, and I'm sure you guys have, he quotes the coach. I mean, he uses the quotes, the coach's cliches. I mean, hell, I've never had that happen in my employ where my coach where my manager is using my catchphrases, but I know that would make me happy and think that I was pretty solidified in my role. But let's jump into some of these questions here. Yeah. And Coach Corey, Coach CH asked this question. Pick up to Corey, high school coach, does a fantastic job. Great program. Why am I hitting the wrong questions? Did you see the comment from Freiermuth that they didn't have any hot routes? What's your thoughts on that?
That's what I mean about combo routes and things like that. There's no real dynamic aspect to the Steelers offense. It doesn't surprise me that they don't have that because you have to look at it like this. It's not simply that Matt Canada is a bonehead and doesn't know what these concepts are. The problem is when you have a new quarterback, one of those quarterbacks is Mitch Trubisky. And I warned you about this back in March when everyone was telling me how great of a signing he was because he went to a Pro Bowl once. He's an idiot. He doesn't see the field. You can't overcomplicate things for him. A hot route is complicated for Mitch Trubisky. He would hang on to the ball and take a sack. And we saw that plenty of times. You got to get open down the field. They wanted their receivers running certain routes because those are the routes Trubisky knew. And then you had Pickett on top of that, who only had, a couple months exposure within the NFL. So they didn't have the ability to add a whole lot of complexity. You have to admit that that's what happened. I'm not saying that that was good. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have just thrown them both in the fire and said, we need to figure this out, grow up. If you're going to be the starting quarterback, you're going to take all of this. They set him up to succeed with what he had. They really tried to make them not be in a position to make a bunch of mistakes, and the two have made a bunch of mistakes anyway. That's the level of talent they were working with. That should change, okay? They have more experience together now. They have an entire offseason. Pickett gets the whole offseason being the starting quarterback. He gets the entire offense to go through. He gets his input to say, I like this, I don't like this. They can all work together. This is why they brought Canada back. You have that continuity. Are they going to do something about these problems? Well, I'm saying this. I'm okay with the decision, but I'm going to watch the first 2 games and see nothing but the wide receivers. And if they're not doing other stuff, if there's not more complexity and more nuance, they wasted the year because they're not going to be any different. It's not difficult to defend this offense. They're not throwing interceptions all the time, but they're not advancing the ball down the field either. I mean, I don't know what the difference is in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it in part 2 of this because that came up. I mean, clearly we can see that their offensive philosophy this year was don't turn it over. I mean, that's pretty much what it was. Don't turn it over, and hopefully we can win games like that. I love Freak because Freak gets right to it. Freaks, and he wrote, they handcuffed Canada to protect Pickett. He was just the nation's fall guy, for he is the low-hanging fruit.
And look, I was saying this after the first couple games. It wasn't just Pickett. It was Trubisky as well. They did the same thing with Trubisky. The offense didn't change a whole lot when Pickett got in there. Pickett just made the throws that Trubisky wouldn't make. I've said this exact comment thousands of times on this show. I am not saying Matt Canada is Bill Walsh. I'm not saying he's going to revolutionize offense when they finally start putting option routes into their repertoire. I'm saying they're going to be improved simply because these things are going to make you a little bit better. But if you can't do them, they don't make you better. They make you a lot worse. That's why they didn't do it. So for Freiermuth to say that without any context, I don't know how fair that is necessarily, but he's the one who's in there. He knows what's going on. He probably lost 20 catches because of the lack of hot routes. I'm sure he feels he could have been utilized more in terms of offensive protection. In other words, there's a rush coming at you, get rid of the ball. Throw it to the guy who's short, who's running hot. If they're not doing that, though, they are doing themselves overall a disservice, but they're not turning the ball over. And I think that was priority number one within their offense this season.
And Corey went on to say that even in their high school offense, they had very rudimentary hot route concepts that they would do.
Hey, in my glory days as a backup quarterback, I knew the hot routes for every package that we had. Okay, that was a while ago. I knew where to throw hot in certain situations. To not have any is really kind of weird.
And that's interesting. To not have any is your coach, your head coach saying, take this out. Let's keep it super simple.
Probably.
That's your head coach.
Probably.
That is your head coach.
And we are taking Freiermuth literally too, okay?
Yes.
To be honest, I think it's impossible to not have something. It depends on what you want to refer to as a hot route, but at the same time, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't in the offense. So I think there is some truth to what he's saying.
There were a lot of points in the offense. Let me jump into this point from Rob Cotting. He said, Lance and Neil, what question would you ask Rooney? I'm going to toss this to Neil. I'd probably ask Rooney a softball question. I'd probably ask a softball question like some of these softballs. But if I were to ask him a question, it would revolve around offense. Specifically, where do the Steelers need to improve on the offensive side of football to generate more points? I mean, they're not scoring enough points to be competitive and to win championships and to be the type of team that I know he wants them to be. So my question would revolve around points and what he sees needs to improve for them to score more points. What about you, Neil?
I would say something to the effect of in 2020 or 2021 because of COVID, reduced cap, you weren't able to spend very much money. 2022, some things happened, you had more money to spend, and you did. Is 2023 going to be more like the year you didn't spend much or the year you spent a lot, relatively speaking? I'd want him to commit to one or the other and not give him the chance to just describe those 2 years, which is usually what he does. For them, and we talked about this a lot last year, Lance, we knew they were going to spend money. They went out and got starters last year. They didn't have the ability to do that because of the shortened cap, because of COVID and the lost 2020 season and all of that. Not the lost season, but revenue was down 900%. So I would want to see if I could get him to commit one way or another. He's probably going to dance on it, but you notice nobody asked anything cap related in this. I kind of want to know what they look at, what they're looking at roster wise, what they want to do to improve. Again, I'm not sold that he's going to give me a decent response, but that question is the one that I want to dive into as a reporter. I want to see from the owner, I want to talk about roster construction. If Jeff Lurie of the Philadelphia Eagles is in front of me, I'm not asking about the run game. I want to know how he's creating the roster because they have a damn good roster. And this is a team too. People should know this. The Eagles won a Super Bowl, then made a mistake with if we'll call it a mistake. They blew their opportunity with their former franchise quarterback, had to get out under his contract, Carson Wentz's, then got rid of their head coach. How many teams go from the Super Bowl with one pairing of head coach and quarterback and get back to the Super Bowl 5 years later with another coach and another quarterback? Absolutely remarkable. That's
Right.
what teams should be doing. If you want to look at the pinnacle of the NFL right now, it is without question the Eagles. So I want to go along those lines because the Eagles were successful and not successful. Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, for example,
Right.
along with their quarterback. They were successful and not successful in the draft. They hit well in free agency. They got sucker trades, things like A.J. Brown being acquired for a first-round pick is highway robbery. Who else did they get? They got somebody else big for trade, I'm pretty sure. They acquired free agents. Ndamukong Suh is a quality role player for them. They hit on everything. So I'm not able to ask Rooney exactly about that. So I'm going to break into the payment piece of it, which is 2 years ago, I know that you didn't spend much money, and I know why. That's why I'm putting it out in the question. I don't want you to restate that. Last year, you had the money, and you did spend it. I know that. I don't want you to restate it. Which is this year going to be more like? The year you had money and spent or didn't spend, or the year you have money and you did? Which one? See what he would do with it.
It'd be interesting to see how he would answer it. And we're going to jump into some more of these questions as part two. We only dug into a few of them because the intro was so long, but rightfully so. I think we needed to touch in, with the Tom Brady stuff. He is a monumental figure in the sport of football that is calling it quits. And he defined an era, multiple eras of football for people. And it's just amazing that, like in my time, I've seen Jordan, I've seen LeBron, I've seen Tom Brady, I've seen Magic, I've seen Kobe, I've seen Kareem, I've seen Gretzky. I've seen some incredible athletes play. And Tom Brady I've seen Serena, Roger Federer. I mean, and he's in that pantheon of absolutes. And I mean, he's a guy, in my opinion, that he's better than Peyton Manning. I mean, and everybody's gonna say, yeah, he's better than Peyton Manning, but man, Peyton Manning was an incredible player. And for me to be able to say it that quickly, I mean, that just shows you just how good Tom Brady was. There was something that you posted on Twitter, Neil, that I cannot remember that I wanted to ask you about, and maybe I'll pull it up a little bit later and ask it to you next week. Just offhand, a lot of draft stuff going out there. And just offhand, I've been just going around in my head. Again, I'm hoping that the Steelers, with that pick early in the second round, go offense and get a playmaker. As I watch these playoffs, I mean, it's essential. You need playmakers. You need playmakers. And I think we've seen that the ascension of Kenny, especially in looking at these players, is going to be critical to what the Steelers become moving forward. You got anything else, Neil, you want to add before we get out of here?
Put dudes on the field, let them work together instead of just running one singular route. Get them the ball in space and let them get upfield. That's really what they should do. You can do whatever you want with the run game after that. If you want to create explosive plays, do that sort of thing. Watch Philadelphia, see how they're doing it. The combo of Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown is lethal. It is extremely difficult to defend both of them, especially when they're working together. They're doing things together because of how a defense is responding to them on the field. The Steelers don't do that. They need probably a little bit more talent to do that. They're taking a step in that direction. I'm excited for that. Beyond that, I'll bet anybody any amount of money or anything else that they want. The Steelers draft a cornerback with one of their first 3 picks, and the Cam Sutton market is going to be higher than people think that it is. So they're going to need another cornerback. Something they have to do.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely high. And I love to see that Wes is saying bye to Felicia. We all know Wes and Felicia are in the same place watching the show. anyway. But with that, we are going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.